Welcome to a video on evaluating the combination and composition of functions from graphs. On this example, we are given two functions, f of x sketched in blue and g of x sketched in red. To evaluate f minus g at the number 3, we start with its definition, which is f of 3 minus g of 3. And so we would evaluate each piece individually. F of 3 is basically asking for the output value when x is equal to 3. So that value is 0. And now g of 3, looking at the second graph, when x is equal to 3, the corresponding output is the number 1. And hence, 0 minus 1 is a function value of -1. Now moving on to part B, this is f of 2 divided by g of 2. So we start with f of 2. When x equals 2 on the blue graph, the corresponding output value appears to be the number 5. So that's 5 divided by g of 2. G of 2, that's the graph in red. So when x is 2, the corresponding output value there is 0. And division by 0 is undefined. For letter C, this is a composite function. By its definition, that's f of g of 1. We'll start with g of 1. So g of 1 is when the argument of the g function is 1. The corresponding output value is 1. So making that substitution, we now have f of 1. And now f of 1, when the argument on the blue graph is 1, the corresponding output value appears to be the number 8. Hence, f circle g at 1 is the number 8. And now letter D, this is g circle g at -1. So by its definition, g of -1. Again, we'll start with the inside function. For this part, we only need the second graph. G of -1, when the argument is -1, the corresponding output value appears to be 3. Making the substitution for g of -1 as 3, we now have the expression g of 3. So when x is equal to 3, the output value there is 1. And that's part D. Finally, for part E, that's evaluating g circle f of -2. By its definition, that's g of f of -2. We'll start with f of -2. F of x is the blue graph. So when x equals -2, the corresponding output value looks like it's this point here, which has an output value of 5. So we'll substitute that in for f of -2. And now g of 5, using the second graph, when x is equal to 5, the output value there is the number 3. And that's the function value for part E.